There's a version of the Tortoise story where he doesn't just crack his shell, he dies. And what happens after he dies is the part nobody ever tells you. You had the safe version, the version for children. Your grandmother picked that one on purpose because the real version, the original, that one would keep a child awake for a week. Tonight, I'm telling you the original, and I need you to pay attention to one thing. What Tortoise says to the birds at the feast. One sentence. That one sentence is the key to the whole story. Before the feast, before the sky, before everything went wrong, the animals lived together in a village. And when I say live together, I mean the way your street lives together. They shared space. They borrowed things. They had arguments about noise and who was blocking whose path. They had community meetings that took 4 hours and decided nothing. Everybody had a job. The birds carried messages, the elephants cleared roads, the lions kept the peace, mostly because nobody wanted to argue with something that size. And then there was Tortoise. Tortoise didn't carry messages, didn't clear roads, didn't keep any peace. Tortoise watched. That was his thing. He would sit so still and so quiet that people forgot he was there. And while they forgot, he noticed everything. Who owed money to who was jealous of who would believe a lie if you wrapped it in the right words. The animals called him clever. They said it was like a good thing. It wasn't. The village smelled like wood smoke and palm oil in the evenings, that heavy, warm smell that sits in the back of your throat and makes everything feel okay. The kind of smell that makes you trust the world. That was the smell Tortoise worked best in. Warmth, trust, people with their guard down. He'd been watching the birds for weeks. One morning, the sky looked different. Higher, like it had stretched itself upward to make room. The birds noticed first. Something was moving up there, something bright. A messenger came down from the clouds. Not a bird anyone recognized. Bigger, feathers that caught light in ways feathers shouldn't. The messenger had an announcement. Every creature with wings was invited to a feast. Not a regular feast, a feast in the sky. The sky people, the beings who lived above the clouds and almost never spoke to the earth, were hosting. And the food, the messenger said, would be like nothing on the ground. Soups that knew your name, yams that melted before you chewed, palm wine that had never touched the earth. Every creature with wings. The birds lost their minds. Parrots screaming over eagles, sparrows arguing about what to wear, everyone talking at once, nobody listening. Saturday morning market energy. And Tortoise, sitting in the shade when nobody was looking, heard every word. He went very quiet. Now, you know what comes next. Most people do. Tortoise wants to go, Tortoise can fly, so Tortoise makes a plan. But most versions of this story skip the details. They skip what Tortoise actually said. They skip how he actually did it. And the how is the part that matters. Because what Tortoise did to those birds wasn't clever, it was surgical. Tortoise went to the birds one by one, not as a group, one by one. That was the first clue about what kind of creature he really was. A fool would have stood in front of everyone and asked. Tortoise knew better. He knew something about people that most people don't think about. When you ask someone for something in front of a crowd, they can say no, easy. The crowd supports them. But when you ask someone alone, when you make it quiet, make it personal, make it feel like a special moment between just you and them, saying no feels cruel. Tortoise used this like a tool. He went to Parrot first because Parrot was proud. Parrot had the best feathers in the village and Parrot knew it. Parrot liked being asked first. My friend, Tortoise said. Right there, the performance had already started. My old friend, my very dear friend, I've been thinking about you, about your feathers. Everyone knows they are the most beautiful in the village, but I wonder. And here Tortoise looked down, the way people look down when they're about to ask for something they don't deserve. Could you spare just one small feather for me, your oldest friend? One feather. That's nothing. That's a favor so small it'll be embarrassing to say no. What kind of friend refuses one feather? Parrot gave him a feather. Tortoise went to Eagle. Same words, same voice, same sad little look downward. Just one feather. You have so many, you won't even miss it. Eagle gave him a feather. Hornbill, one feather. Sunbird, one feather. Kingfisher, crow, weaver bird. Same words every time. Same smile every time. And here's the thing. Each bird only lost one feather. One feather is nothing. It grows back. It's a small favor between friends. But Tortoise wasn't asking one bird. He was asking every bird in the village. And none of them knew that. Each bird thought they were the only one being asked. Each bird thought this was a private moment between friends. Only Tortoise saw the full picture. Only Tortoise knew what he was building. By the time he was done, Tortoise was covered head to shell in feathers of every color. He looked like something that had never existed before. Not a bird, not a tortoise, something in between. Something put together from borrowed parts. And when he spread those borrowed wings and lifted off the ground for the first time in his life, the birds cheered. They cheered for him. They clapped their wings and made noise and celebrated the clever tortoise who found a way to fly. They didn't know what they had just built. I want to stop here for a second, because what happens next, what Tortoise says on the way to the feast, that's the moment the whole story turns. And I found 3 different versions of it. 2 were in old books, story collections from the early 1900s. The third was from a recording, an elder in Ondo State telling the story the way his own grandmother told him decades ago. The words are a little different in each version, but the trick is exactly the same in all 3. And when you hear it, you won't just recognize it from a folktale, you'll recognize it from your own life. They flew upward, all of them, the birds with their real wings and Tortoise with the borrowed ones, rising through clouds that got thicker and warmer the higher they climbed. And while they flew, Tortoise spoke up. "My friends," he said, casual, relaxed, like a thought had just occurred to him. "I've been thinking. The sky people have never met us. They don't know our names. And you know how it is when you visit someone important. First impressions, you want to bring your best self." The birds listened. This made sense. "I think we should each pick a new name, a special name, a feast name, something the sky people will remember." The birds loved this idea. Why wouldn't they? It was fun. It was harmless. Parrot chose Jewel of the Forest. Eagle chose Lord of the Wind. Crow chose Shadow King. Each bird picked something grand, something proud, something that matched how they saw themselves. Then someone asked Tortoise, "What about you? What name did you choose?" Tortoise smiled. Remember that smile. I told you at the beginning to watch for what Tortoise says. This is it. "I will be called," Tortoise said it slowly, tasting the words before he let them out.
"I will be called All of You."
All of you?
All of you? What kind of name is that? Just a name, a funny little name. You won't even think about it again. The bird shrugged, laughed it off, went back to talking about the feast.
They should not have laughed it off. They broke through the clouds, and every bird stopped flying. The sky wasn't empty. It never had been. Above the clouds, past everything the animals thought they knew about the world, there was a whole kingdom. Tables made from something that looked like wood but seemed alive. Food piled in towers so high you couldn't see the top. Steam rising from dishes that smelled like the first meal anyone ever cooked. The sky people stood at the edges, tall, quiet, smiling the way a host smiles when they've spent a long time preparing and they want to see your face when you see what they've done. And the smell hit them before they landed. Pepper soup, the kind that burns the back of your throat before the spoon even reaches your mouth. Scotch bonnet and crayfish and dried fish and that deep red palm oil heat that makes your nose run and your eyes water and your hand reach for more before you finished what's in your mouth. Every bird stood still, breathing it in, overwhelmed. Every bird except Tortoise. Tortoise was already calculating. The sky people stepped forward. They opened their arms. They smiled. "Welcome," they said. "We have prepared this feast,
The feast is for all of you.
You heard it, right? For all of you. Tortoise turned to the birds. His face was calm, almost sorry. He said, "You heard them. The feast is for all of you. That's my name. All of this food is for me." The birds didn't speak. They just stared at him, at the feathers, their feathers, the ones they gave freely, without suspicion, without a second thought. And then they looked at the food. Tortoise was already eating. He ate the way he did everything, carefully, completely. Every dish, every bowl, every calabash of wine. He ate like someone who knew this was borrowed time and borrowed feathers, and he was going to take everything he could before the bill came due. The sky people looked confused. They'd said the feast was for all of you. They meant everyone. But the strange creature covered in patchwork feathers was eating alone, and the birds, the actual guests, the ones with real wings, stood there with empty hands. Nobody stopped him. That's the part that stays with me, not the trick. The trick was clever. What stays with me is the silence. The birds had wings. They had numbers. They could have said something, done something. The sky people were right there. They didn't. They just watched him eat. When Tortoise was finally full, he wiped his mouth. He burped loudly in the silent hall. He looked at the starving birds. "That was delicious," Tortoise said. "We should go home now." There was no shouting. There was no argument. Hunger kills anger. It replaces it with something much colder. Then the birds moved. Parrot walked up to Tortoise. He didn't speak. He just reached out with his beak, grabbed the red and green feather he had given him, and pulled it out. Eagle walked up. He took his gold feather back. Crow took his black feather. Weaver bird, sunbird, kingfisher, hornbill, one by one, bird by bird, they took back exactly what they had given. Nothing more, nothing less. Tortoise stood on the edge of the clouds, heavy, grounded, stripped bare, a reptile miles above the dirt. The birds took flight. They began the long journey down. "Wait!" Tortoise shouted. The fear finally broke through his arrogance. "Please, how will I get down? Send a message to my wife. Tell her to bring out all the mattresses, all the pillows, all the clothes. Pile them outside my house so I can jump." Parrot paused in the air. He looked back at Tortoise. "I will tell her," Parrot said. Parrot flew down to the earth. He found Tortoise's wife. "Your husband sent a message from the sky. He says he is jumping down. He says you must bring out all the hoes, all the cutlasses, all the stones, the iron pots, the anvils, pile the hardest things you own outside the house." The wife was confused, but she obeyed. She piled the iron and the stone. High above, Tortoise looked down. He couldn't see clearly. He just saw a pile forming in front of his home. He closed his eyes and he jumped. The wind screamed in his ears. The clouds blurred past. He fell for a long time. He had time to think on the way down. He had time to realize that cleverness doesn't stop gravity. He hit the pile of iron. The sound wasn't a thud. It was the sound of a mountain breaking. His smooth, perfect shell shattered into 50 different pieces. Blood soaked into the red dirt. Here's what happened after Tortoise fell. But the original story doesn't end there because Tortoise was dying. He lay in the dirt, his body exposed, screaming in agony. The only creatures around were the ants, the insects of the dirt. Tortoise begged for help. He begged them to stitch his shell back together. The ants agreed, but ants don't work for free. They made a deal with Tortoise. They would put his shell back together piece by jagged piece, but in exchange, he would never run again. He would carry the weight of his betrayal on his back forever. His punishment wasn't the fall. His punishment was surviving the fall. He became a prisoner in his own broken house. The shell healed. The cracks stayed. That's why every tortoise in the world has those lines on its shell, those patterns, those cracks, not decoration, scars from the time the first tortoise borrowed what wasn't his and the ground reminded him what he actually was. And Tortoise lived. He lived. He walked away from the spot where he fell. He went home. He closed his door. And then a season later, he was knocking on doors again. Different trick, different feast, same smile, same words. My friend, my very dear friend, just a small favor. And that is the part they don't tell children. Not the blood, not the fall, not the cracked shell. Kids can handle that. What they can't handle, what's too heavy for a bedtime story, is this. It didn't change him. And now you know how it really ends. Not with a lesson, with a pattern.